So if anybody else can hear me other than Shannon, all right, Daryl, there you go. In Maine. Well, I bet you got some snow up there, don't you, buddy? And if you look behind me, the window is open so you can see the snow. I may close that later on. But all right, so we're going to get started. Snow driving. Any adverse condition driving has always been a real highlight of my driving career. In other words, I love it. And I should qualify that. I should qualify that because when we get 2 feet of snow, then, it's not like you're going anywhere anyway. I know you think you've got snow tires and you think you've got, another 6 inches of lift on your truck or your ATV or your SUV. And guess what? When you get to 2 feet of snow, unless you have a snowmobile, which works pretty well, you're probably not going to go too many places. So that's the reality. The other thing that should be said somewhat seriously is if you fancy yourself a good driver, there are times when the best decision, even though you probably could make it, is to not do it that particular day, or wait till the plows go through, or wait till it stops snowing in an hour or a day, rather than to brave the elements when you have very little chance of success. I've got all-wheel drive cars, and they work pretty well. But in Colorado, in the last 24 hours, we got about 2 feet of snow here in Louisville or Boulder. That's a lot of snow. And it wasn't the light and fluffy kind of snow. It was the medium snow. It wasn't the super wet snow either, because my snow blower, my 8 horsepower dual track snowblower with 6 forward speeds, could do it, but I had to gear down to first gear, which means it's pretty intense stuff. And and I like to go to Walmart too. In my younger days, and do donuts and stuff like that. Now I don't really have to do that since I get to race all the time and I'm at the track all the time. So if I want to do slides, I can just do slides. But those were fun times and recommended times. I mean, if you want to be a good snow driver, one of the elements is to have pretty good slide control. And if you don't have good slide control, you're probably going to get into a slide when you're driving on snow and ice. One of the biggest things you want to do, increased following distance. I know it sounds ridiculous to say. Normally, following distance in the dry is 2 seconds from a stationary point if you're in a regular car, and 3 seconds if you're in an SUV or a truck, pickup truck. The reason is it takes them longer to stop because they weigh more and their center of gravity is higher. And that's just physics. But what happens in snow and ice, if the visibility is good, the stopping distances obviously are longer. So you want to give yourself a lot more room, because if it's underneath the snow, you can't tell what surface is under there. It could be glare ice. It could be regular ice. It could be somewhat grippy ice, which is kind of an oxymoron. And you don't really know. So since you don't know and you don't want to be behind somebody and have glare ice be underneath the snow, you want to leave double the regular following distance. So we're talking 6 seconds if you're in an SUV or a pickup truck. That's a lot of space. But if you want to be the one that's not involved in the 56 car pileup, then that's one way in minimizing the chances that you will be. Because typically what happens is you'll have a group of people that are normally used to following a little too closely, even in the dry, and they will slip. For a moment, they'll know that it's slippery and they'll leave proper distance and all that. And then they'll relax and kind of go back to what they normally are used to doing, which is following 3 seconds or 2 seconds or even closer. And then the risk goes up, and then inevitably somebody jams on their brakes or swerves or spins, and that's when the cascade starts. And it can be avoided. So anyway, let's start from the beginning. If your car is not in a garage overnight and it's outside, and currently one of my trucks is, it's got about 2 feet of snow on it. Some of it melted today. You got to wipe all that stuff off. You got to get yourself a good scraper and go out there and not only scrape off the front window, but the side windows and the back window and get most of the snow or all of the snow off of your hood, off of your roof. If you're in a pickup truck, if the bed's closed, okay, I guess you can keep some snow in the bed. That's not going to blow out or, fly off like a big wad of snow on your roof. But all of your windows have got to be clear. The inside of your window, your windshield that gets that little white film on it, you wanna get a damp cloth or some Windex and a rag and get in there so that when the sun shines on it or headlights shine on it, it's not going to make it so that you can't see or you're blind. It'll have a white film and that will reflect and you won't be able to see for a moment. And that's never a good thing. So that's job one. In other words, get out there, start your vehicle up, turn on the defroster, and as the car's warming up and the windshield's warming up, get all the snow off of it. Now, hopefully, before the winter season has happened, you've already, checked your battery, checked your fluids, so that you're not trying to start your vehicle with a battery that's just about ready to die. You turn it over and it's woo woo woo. Well, guess what? When the temperature goes down tomorrow, there you'll be with your automatic car, and it's not going to start, and you may or may not have a jump box or a power station in your house. So try to get that stuff addressed before winter happens. Does your car need, obviously, tires? We've already talked about tires in depth in one of the episodes. So if you live in an area where there's lots of snow, get a set of winter tires. I mean, they're dramatically better. That will give you an advantage in winter driving. And if you're going up skiing or, you like to go out when it's really bad, you will need every advantage that you can get. So winter tires without studs is really good. Winter tires with studs, I don't usually recommend. If you're on the low elevations in Colorado, because if it's dry, then they kind of tear up the pavement, and then it takes you longer to stop with winter tires with studs on dry pavement than it would with just winter tires or mud and snow rated tires, or if it's dry, summer tires. So there's winter tires with studs. There's a variety of apparatuses like a spiked spider or the snow sock that goes over or around the tire that they're trying to simulate chains. Chains are probably the best, but top speed is going to be pretty low with chains. I mean, you probably don't want to go much over 20 or 25 with chains, but they're going to be even better than snow winter tires with studs. But probably not going to go on with chains from here to California. Be a long trip. So make sure your vehicle is in good shape. If you want to replace a windshield, you probably should do that because temperature variations are going to be more dramatic in the winter. And if you've got cracks in your windshield and the temperature heats way up and then it cools way down and heats way up, cools way down, then you hit a bump, that crack can get worse and worse and worse. And once it gets to the place where visibility is affected, where it starts to bend the light rays, then it becomes more of a safety issue. So you want to get that done again before winter. And yes, I know that in Colorado and anywhere else, right after you put a new windshield and you're following that big truck, that's when it propels that rock, and now you need another new windshield. So obviously try not to follow the trucks, but sometimes those rocks just come out from who knows where. I mean, I've had that happen cruising along and didn't even see anybody around me, and a rock, either I kicked it up or something, and started a crack on my windshield. So but you do what you can. You try to keep your car in good condition so that you're going to have the advantage in adverse driving conditions. Also, when you're driving in the winter or you're driving in the snow, in adverse conditions, take some snacks, take some water, flashlight, some triangles, that kind of stuff, so that if you do get stranded or you spin into a snowbank, and obviously your cell phone, if you're going to be there for a while, you can go without water, I guess, for a week, without food for a couple weeks or something like that. I don't want to do that experiment. So I'm going to be taking some snacks and some water. Some water, definitely. I mean, if you can take some water, you can last a week or more. Try to have your tank filled up if you're going any place, but really short distances. If you're going from here, if you're going like 100 miles, top off your tank here, and then when you get to the place you're going, top it off again. Because if you get stranded out there and you're on your last gallon of gas, then you're going to be stranded in a very adverse type of weather, and you run out of gas, then your heat source is gone. So it's, things can get out of hand risk wise very easily. And all of this is very easily prevented by, just a little common sense. Make sure you've checked all your fluids, your tire pressure. Look at that. Make sure that you haven't picked up a nail, or if you have, the tire pressure warning mechanisms on your car, then, if you see a low tire pressure deal, then yeah, get that checked out right away. because having a flat tire is bad enough. Having a flat tire in winter weather is really miserable. Even if you don't change it yourself, you're still there. So try to look for all that stuff. Some other stuff that's very important is you want to be looking around. Um, you're going to have to try to figure out where the lanes are, because if there's a lot of snow, obviously you're not going to see white lines or maybe even medians or maybe even guardrails. So give yourself, if there are tracks, follow those tracks. If it's really bad, sometimes 4 lanes end up being 2 lanes because the plow's gone through one place. Everybody wants to be in that place. And if there's a foot of snow everywhere else, then there's only going to be 1 lane, even if normally there are 2 lanes. So keep that in mind as well. Types of cars, we talked about this as well. Normally, I'm a low center of gravity guy, but if there's a foot of snow, guess what? All you high center of gravity SUV guys and truck guys that I give a hard time to normally, well, it's your time. Because all the low center of gravity guys are staying indoors, or we go as far as we can go until our car gets high centered with about, if it's fluffy snow, we can go 12 inches, and if it's heavy snow, not that much. So now, and only now, high center of gravity vehicles or higher center of gravity vehicles become more desirable, because with the proper tires and that kind of stuff, they can go further in snow than lower center of gravity vehicles can go. Now, the other thing is there's a difference between all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive. Typically, all-wheel drive is constant four-wheel drive. In other words, you can't turn it off, you can't redirect it. It is what it is. There can be a limited slip differential in the rear. There can be a limited slip from the front to the rear. And there can be a limited slip or a locked in the front axle. Typically in all-wheel drive, you'll get limited slip in the rear. You'll get either an open diff or limited slip front to rear, and you'll get an open or limited slip in the front. Four-wheel drive, like a serious off-road pickup truck, you can have a locking diff in the rear, you can have a locking center diff, and you can have a locking front diff. So if you've got everything locked, literally all 4 of your wheels and tires are going the same speed, which is good for forward traction, but is not so good if you're trying to make a turn. Then it might be better if you release the limited slip or the locked diff in the front and change it to either limited slip or open. Likewise, sometimes the center diff. I had a Mazda 323 GTX with a locking center differential. And that thing was wonderful in the snow and icy roads at pretty high speed, because with that center differential locked, the left front and the right rear were always turning at the same number of revolutions, and it was really good for stability at pretty high speed on ice and snow. When we were going up to go ski in Vail, you could do some pretty amazing stuff with that car. So anyway, let's see. Let's get some more feedback. Anybody got any stories, any questions, any cars that were particularly good in the snow? that you want to tell me about, or particularly bad in the snow? Like if I brought my Corvette out, it's got Hoosier tires on it, and it would be, I don't even know whether I could get it out of the driveway. I'm pretty sure I could not. It would high center right away, and that would be that. So the Corvettes are in the garage where they should be, and the winter cars, the Golf R and the Golf Sport Wagon, are the ones that we've been going out with. Um, and actually, here in Colorado, the major roads are fine. I mean, I think they said there was like, 150 plows out in Colorado that worked overnight when we got the 2 feet of snow. So obviously, here in Colorado, they know, they know what to do. Unlike, I would imagine, Texas and, places that are typically warm year round and don't get snow. We get snow, and typically we know how to handle snow as far as, getting the trucks out and all that stuff. So the roads really today aren't that bad. I guess we're supposed to get a little more snow today, and then it's supposed to warm up, and then by the weekend it's supposed to be 55, 60 degrees. So, and that's the way Colorado rolls. We'll get a winter storm. It'll be cold for a few days, sometimes a week or two, but usually in a few days, then it'll warm right up and the snow will be gone, and we won't have a drought anymore because we got 2 or 3 or 4 feet of snow, and there you go. And that's why we don't have a lot of bugs like other places that are really warm all the time. Remember, I was down in Houston when I was a truck driver, and there were bugs so big I couldn't identify them. I mean, they had numbers on the side and little flashing lights. It was crazy. And you typically don't see that in Colorado. Now, I have seen a tarantula spider at the Pueblo racetrack. So it's possible, but not normally. So anyway, let's talk about slides for a moment. If nobody's going to give me a story or a question, there's 2 types of slides: understeer and oversteer. Understeer is when you turn the steering wheel and the car goes straighter than your steering wheel is turned. So that's understeer. Oversteer is when the rear end of the car goes out into a big tail happy slide. That's oversteer. I've always liked oversteer. Understeer is programmed into cars because understeer is easier to control. So there's 4 causes for slides: either too much power, too much braking, too much speed, or abruptness of steering. If you don't do one of those 4 things, you really can't slide a car. So we'll talk about understeer first. You want to find out what the cause is and do less of whatever that cause is. In other words, let's say that you're going around a corner, and as soon as you accelerate, the car starts to understeer or push or plow. You want to get up off the gas right away, and I promise you the car will immediately turn or understeer less. Likewise, if you get on the brakes and the car doesn't turn, that's an understeer caused by too much braking. If you don't have ABS, your tires could be locked. Even if you have ABS, it can be, it can be the type of ABS that lets the tires lock for a moment, and in that moment, it's not going to turn. So again, the fix is to lessen the brake pressure, and then the car will turn or it will understeer less. If it's because of too much speed, You can actually brake a little bit, and that will reduce the understeer. Just brake lightly. Or if you're turning your steering, and there's a difference between the amount of steering you have turned and the amount your car is turning, then you don't want to go any farther than that. You can turn the wheel all you want. If you're beyond the threshold of grip, the car's not going to turn. So you might as well go back, find the place where it's just right at that limit. If you turn it more, it's not going to turn. Go back. Okay, there, that's where it is. And just ride that threshold as opposed to turn more and more and more. What happens is eventually it grips, and if it grips abruptly, then that can initiate an oversteering slide. Okay, so that's understeer. Oversteer, you have the same causes: too much power, too much brake, too much speed, abruptness of steering. But in addition to doing less of whatever the cause is, you also have to do a steering correction. So you want to steer in the direction of the skid. If that doesn't make sense to you, that's usually the direction that your rear end is going. Or steer the car in the direction that you want it to go. So if you're going straight ahead and all of a sudden your car is going this way, well, you want to turn that way because you want your car to go straight ahead. So steer in the direction that you want the car to go, as you're reducing whatever the cause was. So for instance, let's say you're going around a corner, and as soon as you get on the power, the rear end of the car starts to come out. So you want to reduce the amount of power that you've given it, steer in the direction that you want the car to go to catch the slide, and then it's going to snap back to straight ahead. So get ready to snap your steering back to center position, and that will get rid of the slide. But you have to steer fast enough to catch the slide. If you're if you're steering in slow motion, if you're, doing this as opposed to wax on, wax off, see how my hand's blurred there? That's what you have to do to catch an acute oversteering slide. And anybody that tells you that you can catch one with push, pull, or shuffle steering, have them prove it to you. I promise you, nobody can thread or shuffle steer fast enough to catch an acute oversteering slide, no matter what they tell you. The other thing is, if it's because of too much power, there's 3 throttle positions basically. There's full throttle, there's zero throttle, and then there's constant throttle. Constant throttle is the amount of pressure on the gas pedal that neither increases nor decreases the speed of the car. So, because what happens is you'll start an oversteering slide because of too much power, and then you'll abruptly lift off the gas. And what's substituted for that is now too much braking. Even though you never touch the brake to the car, you're decelerating because you're all the way up off the gas, especially if you were on the gas pretty hard. So then what you want to do is go to constant throttle, steer in the direction that you want the car to go to catch the slide. Then when you feel that pause, snap it back to center, and then you've caught the slide. If you don't get it all the way back to center, then you get a weight transfer amplification, and when the wheels should be straight ahead, they're still turned, and that initiates a slide in the opposite direction, even more dramatic because you have that weight transfer from side to side, lateral weight transfer. And that's going to amplify it. So it's very important to get your steering in phase with the slide. so that you're steering fast enough to catch it. And then when it pauses, you're ready to snap your steering back to center so that it dampens out any other slides. And if you can do that, it can be great fun. I mean, if you've ever seen or done drifting or gone out to the Walmart parking lot, Shannon, to do some donuts, um, once you get the hang of it and the feel of it and the timing of it, it's really fun and it becomes almost effortless to just, get into an oversteering slide and keep an oversteering slide, for 360, 720, figure eights, writing your name in the snow or whatever it is. Um, it's really a lot of fun. And once you get the hang of it, it's pretty cool, and it can save you in an emergency situation. So anyway, oversteering slides, if you get into one because you've trail braked going into a corner or around a corner, again, you want to release the brakes, steer in the direction that you want the car to go, catch the slide, go back to center position, and here we go. All right, let's see. We've got some comments here. Get a plow on my truck. No. It's a dually, and no. Yep, expect the unexpected, create space. I think we talked about that a little bit. Yep, good one. Rain-X or fog-free, that works pretty well. I've used it. It's very good for not letting the snow or the rain sit there, especially, if you're going at pretty good speed. It will, it'll keep you from having to use your windshield wipers as much, and that can increase visibility. So I've used it. I don't normally use it, but I have used it. Or if you get your windshield treated with it, usually it will last a couple months or so before you have to retreat it. Only keep motorcycles in garages. Well, yeah. I mean, Shannon, when I was much younger, I would, on a snowy day, jump on the motorcycle before the plows got out there and ruined it, and slip slide around on the streets or whatever. Because, early in the morning, there's not going to be very many people out there. And it was just great fun for me back then, doing that kind of stuff. Let's see here. Love it when you say stud. Okay, stud. Let's see. Hey, Fred, you rock as well. Yeah, unfortunately, common sense is getting harder and harder to find, and crazy is becoming easier and a sellable product. And we're not going to go all the way there, but, you know, let's see. Common sense, lifted suburban man wagon works well, I bet. I wonder what kind of tires do you have on that bad boy, Shannon? You got some 35s on that thing, or what do you have? And yes, Daryl, you're absolutely right. Ground clearance is from the lowest part of the vehicle, usually the differential. Yep. And lift kits do not increase ground clearance usually. Yes, that is true. Unless you have like a Unimog or something like that, where the diff is not in the center, it's up a little higher, and that gives you even more ground clearance. Bigger tires will also raise the differential from the ground, so that'll give you a little bit more. But yeah, a lot of people have a lot of clearance from their differential up, and that doesn't matter, because once that differential is stuck, then you're stuck. And that's a really good point. Let's see. Parking on hills with snow and ice turns cars into sleds. Yeah, I was watching a video where where it was super slick ice and just every vehicle, you couldn't even stand up on it. Every vehicle was just sliding down this, 8% grade hill, and there wasn't really much anybody could do. Nobody had, let's say, studs on their tires or chains or any of that stuff. And boy, you can really get into some it's not too amusing when it happens to you, but amusing to look at. um, yes, indeed. Hey, Ken, you can't get milk under a steer. Okay. Don't quit your day job, Shannon. Understeer as a result of slush or hydroplaning. Okay. Well, it can be, Daryl, it can be understeer or oversteer. Usually it's understeer first because the front tires will get in a rut and they'll pitch the car or yaw the car, if you will, to one side. And then the rear tires sometimes will stay in the track and you'll create an oversteer, or sometimes the rear tires follow and you can generate a spin. Again, hydroplaning, tread is your best bet against hydroplaning and keeping your speed down enough so that there's not a barrier between the tire and the road, which is what hydroplaning is, a water barrier. So, and you should be able to feel that. If you're paying attention and you've got pretty good feel, you'll feel when the car kind of moves around and you didn't do a steering input. Usually that's the car trying to tell you that it's hydroplaning, or it's just getting to that point, or you've hit a snow drift, or you're changing lanes. You were in the track, and then to change lanes, you've got to get out of the track and go over a big thing of snow. You've got to be very careful with your steering because the steering's not going to be linear. You're going to have to compensate for some mini slides, typically in that situation when you change lanes. Pre-slide apex approach. Okay. I'm going to assume that you mean you slow down enough before the turn so that you don't have to brake during the turn. That's probably not what you meant, but that's where I'm going to go with that. Let's see. Doesn't all this change with front wheel drive and rear wheel drive? Good question, Daryl. It does. All wheel. Here's the reason that all wheel drive is better in adverse conditions, even going around corners. Um, Picture a car and picture two people on the rear bumper and two people on the front bumper, and they're trying to push the car sideways, and it's on glare ice. Well, if it's a front wheel drive car and you're accelerating, the two people in the front are pushing, and the front is going to break loose first because it's under power, whereas the rear is just going to kind of follow along typically. Likewise, same thing, only the opposite. If you've got a rear wheel drive car and you're accelerating, now the two people on the side fender are pushing, and that side typically is going to break loose first if you're going around a corner under light acceleration. Whereas if you have an all-wheel drive car, you're going to be splitting that power fairly equally, depending on the car, of course, between the front and the rear tires. So the car is going to go around that corner a little more uniformly instead of one side breaking loose, the front end on a front wheel drive car and the rear end on a rear wheel drive car. So that's why your all wheel drive or four wheel drive is going to be a little bit better in adverse conditions, even around corners. Let's see here. Pre-scrubbing wasn't you. Bid, you mean big guns, I'm assuming. Big, slow man wagon. You never did tell me what kind of tires you have on that bad boy. Do you have winter tires or big mud tires or just regular ones? On my trucks, I've got BF Goodrich all-terrain TA radials, and they've worked pretty well, actually. I mean, I've tried other ones. The Goodyears were good. Big O's were pretty good, but the combination of how the BF Goodrich works and how they look, and as long as you rotate them, anytime you got a dually and you're towing a lot of stuff, it's hard to get really good tire wear, at least if you're me. So you really got to keep them rotated, and that means you may have to have them mounted and dismounted so that everything is going to wear as much as it possibly can. So there you go, 33s. Yep, that'll get you through some snow, buddy. Let's see, Daryl, if oversteering in front wheel drive isn't constant throttle, good to control a slide. Boy, that's a really good question. In a front wheel drive car, you can have power understeer. You can have power oversteer, but usually it's going to be if you chop the throttle. Then the weight transfers to the front, it unweights the rear, and you can get some pretty dramatic oversteering slides in a front wheel drive car. And a lot of people that drive front wheel drive cars are not used to oversteering slides like rear wheel drive folk are. So it can be pretty dramatic. But here's the principles that always work. Do less of what you just did right before the oversteer, and then steer in the direction that you want the car to go until you catch it. Once you catch it, get ready to snap it back to center, and then you're going to be good. And constant throttle. Let's see, in an oversteer with a front wheel drive car, you're absolutely right. Some throttle is probably going to pull the car out of the oversteer because it's front wheel drive. So yes, and that was a really good question. And turn off the traction control. Well, okay, there's two sides to that. The traction control will help you if it's a little slide. But if it's a big slide and you really need to turn, sometimes the traction control will try to keep you straight, and you don't always want that. Usually, though, it's going to be more of a help than a hindrance. Most people, when they get into slides, it's under braking, and they're usually going straight. And in that situation, if the car starts to yaw a little bit sideways, if you've got active handling, it can apply a single brake to the side of the car that will help you stabilize it. So, if you're not too savvy with slide control, keep the active handling, keep the traction control, keep all of that stuff on, and of course, lower your speed. So hopefully, when you reach a threshold or a limit, you're not going to overshoot it by a lot. Because if you overshoot it by a lot, none of this will matter. If you go into a corner, a few miles an hour beyond the limit, okay, you may be able to save that. If you go beyond the limit 20, 30 miles an hour, none of this stuff will matter. You'll just be along for the ride. So that's where, driving feel comes in. When you're driving in winter conditions, when you're driving in snow, you want to feel what the vehicle's trying to tell you. I teach that you should test traction every now and then if you're not sure how much traction you have, especially on long downhill roads. And what that means is press on the brake, and just as soon as you feel a little bit of ABS, note how much pressure you've applied. Normally, if it's dry pavement, you're going to have to really hit the brakes hard to get the ABS, anti-lock braking system, that little pulse, pulse, pulse on your brake pedal. But if you're on glare ice, whereas it used to take 25 pounds of pressure on dry pavement, now it could be 5 pounds of pressure. You just touch that brake and it's bump, 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 bump. So yeah, that lets you know how much traction you have, and then, you know, gauge your speed, adjust your speed accordingly. If you thought you had all this traction and you don't, obviously slow down. And the other part is true too, I guess. If you think that you're on glare ice and you test the traction and you have a little more than you thought, then okay, maybe you can go just a little faster. Hey Brian, welcome to the party. In ice driving school situations, I turn off as much traction control as I can. If it's on, tends to fight, yes, what I'm trying to do, but in street driving, I would leave it on. Yep, I think I just said that. only, only it took me a lot longer to say it than you. Um, let's see. Nissan Titan is shut down completely in the snow. It tries to drive itself. Yeah, and all the people with the autonomous cars in the snow, yeah, welcome to the real world. uh, so anyway, let's see. It's about almost 7:50. Wow, time flies when you're having fun. So, in conclusion, I love to drive in the snow or in the rain or any adverse conditions. Even motorcycles, boy. I mean, some of my favorite times, and I don't do them anymore, but I had dual purpose bikes, and the first snow in Colorado, get up really early and fire that baby up, and before the plows get out there, just slip and slide, and it was just so much fun. And of course, I'm wearing full protective gear and boots and gloves and winter coats and full face helmets and all that stuff. But man, those were good times, and I've wimped out in my older age, and I've got nothing but street bikes now, nothing with semi knobby tires or knobby tires on, that would do actually pretty good in the snow. Um, and sorry, Shannon, no, this does not count for driving school. This is a little more advanced than driver education in most circumstances, but hopefully it's more fun. Hopefully nobody was nodding off. I hope not. Anyway, um, and if you've never had the chance to really, drive cross country, pulling a 48-foot trailer in a snowstorm with enough crosswind that it moves you from one lane to the other as you're going through Kansas, you probably don't have to have that situation. It's fun to experience. It's fun to know that you got through it. But if you don't have to do it, I wouldn't put myself in that situation unless it was absolutely necessary. So anyway, I guess yeah, it's pretty easy to make me laugh sometimes, Shannon. Not always, but when I'm talking about driving or riding, I kind of light up, as you can tell, because I love it. So anyway, if there aren't any other questions, I guess we'll call it. Hey, Keely, how are you, girl? Glad you made it to the party, although a bit late. So anyway, you guys be careful out there. Use good common sense. Do these things, and for a moment, all will be right with the world. And we will see you next Tuesday at 7 p.m. If you have anything that you want me to talk about, this was episode 8, and it was snow driving. And we had a lot of fun. So have a good evening, and we'll talk to you later. See ya. Bye bye.